Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television, and we're broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria. Today on the program, our focus is on small and medium enterprise operators in Nigeria and how their growth and development can be achieved through government participation. And I have here with me in the studio two business development experts, Ayo Emakhiome, who's Managing Director of Coinbox Limited, and Edward Esene is a Senior Consultant with Kinetic Associates. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sticking around. Well, just before we went on that quick break, we were talking about the fact that most microfinance banks are they're doing their operations like commercial banks, and so at the end of the day, when they do eventually give loans to SMEs, it's almost at the same interest rate as what they would get from a commercial bank. Edward, let me come back to you on this one. Could you just quickly talk to us on what should be done to ensure that microfinance banks actually run as microfinance banks and not as commercial banks, where you go to get a loan and then you collect with an interest rate of almost the same thing as what you get in a commercial bank?
Okay, you see, the good thing for me that I have my background in venture capital, and it is a good source of fund for SMEs, entrepreneurs, startup entrepreneurs. Okay. So we tell people, if you cannot access that as equity, go for debt and look towards an MFI, MFB, microfinance bank. There are just two things the microfinance bank need to do. First, they need to cut down their operating expenses, which is very, very key. A lot of microfinance banks, I have names, we've done one or two transactions with some of them. They are heavily set up with car, with AC, with all of those things. And those are running an operating cost that we imply on the cost of funds.
That we give to customers.
For the customers. So they need to be humble enough to know that, okay, we are not servicing elite customers, or we're not serving people that are doing 200 million naira turnover, so we cannot set up like this, because whatever it is in business, your cost element has to be absorbed within your revenue. Do you understand? So they need to cut down their operating expenses in whatever capacity they can, and that takes a whole lot. It takes a whole lot of humility for them to be humble. Then lastly, they need to source cheap funds. It's very, very key. Not the interbank lending or collecting from CBN. They need to be well structured and look at government guarantees that they can use to assess, even if it's a foreign fund. There was a time Kiva was giving out money, this other Bangladesh bank, this guy that did it, Grameen, where they were looking at emerging market and how they could empower grassroots and financial institutions, cheap costs and cheap funds that you can give out to your people. But again, most of our institutions are not structured to collect or get to some of these foreign funds at very cheap rates. So two things: cut down on your expenses, then source for cheap fund. BOI has that kind of opportunity. You see a situation where a Dangote gives BOI 2 billion naira at probably 2% and mandates BOI to give it out at 6 or 9%. Those are single-digit funds that we've been clamoring for in this country. And most MLBs, they can't even do that. They want to give you a rate at double-digit, almost at the same rate that the banks are giving it out. Why? Because the cost of funds, their cost of operation would apply on the cost of fund, and the way they themselves sourced this money
is expensive.
Okay, so you mentioned that we need to structure SMEs to be able to access foreign funds.
The institutions. Only the big players that can access foreign funds. You probably need a BG. You need there are a lot of foreign lenders that are looking into Nigeria that give some business, which we also do, but I'm saying an SME can't go that far. You can't access that kind of money.
You can't access it, but how can they begin to try to see how they can access it? Who should they be talking to?
You need to grow in terms of your capacity, your structure, your documentations, your turnover. You just need to grow. But we are saying, for the kind of money that SME or startup entrepreneurs need, go to an angel investor, a VC firm, or an MFB, a microfinance bank. Now, we are saying that the MFB should reduce their costs, and also they themselves should be structured enough. There are some Nigerian banks that cannot access foreign funds in terms of their own personal credit rating. If you give a BG to a foreign lender, they have their preferences. In fact, it's so bad that it is based on where your BG is coming from. Your bank guarantee will influence your interest rates. If the foreign lender feels that they are not well secure, they don't trust this. They don't trust this name to be able to repay this volume. Your interest rate, just like the exposure, likely goes up. But if they feel one of the 4 big banks, or your interest rate comes down. So the same thing. So there are all this international global credit rating that applies. So even the MLB themselves has to be structured for them to assess cheap foreign funds that they can give out at even 6%.
Now let's still go back to this issue that we're talking about, government participation in helping SME operators grow. Some of them have also complained about inconsistency in government policies, and not to even mention the bureaucracy involved in getting all of these things done. It's not peculiar to the SMEs, but how can this be addressed to give the industry a better chance to grow?
That is what we've been talking about since. It's still the same thing. Government should stop looking short term. It's time government start looking long term.
Not even medium term.
Not medium term. How it works is this. I tell you, in the next 25 years, this is where I see my country. In the next 50 years, this is where I see my country. In the next 100 years, this is where I see my country. From there, you now do rewind to today. So if I want to start today to get there, that is where you now have your medium-term plans. It's not that you say, I have a plan 5 years, and that is where I'm going to know. You make a long-term plan, and then you break it down to today. So it's based on that, you now start acting, which we expect the government to do. And then whoever is the next person that takes over from government should not be after self-celebration. It is when you become a leader, it's no more about you. You don't exist. When you become a leader, your job is now to see to the success of wherever, in this case, the government you are leading.
Okay, so now let's specifically point out this areas where government can actually help in participation, help SME operators to grow. We've mentioned finance and some of the policies that it also come up with. Can you also mention some other ones that we didn't talk about in the course of the conversation?
Okay. I'll just say, since we're looking at SME operators, it's good we differentiate and create the categories. SME operator, like I've said earlier, there are 4 categories, and their needs are different, uniquely different. So we cannot, so the government themselves need to pay attention and look at the different segmentations within the SME body
before they bring out the policy.
That's it. Very, very important. So the first guys we have there are the micro guys. They are in Tejiosho, Alaba, Onitsha, Parakot, Kano, Kaduna, Shagamu. Funding is not their problem. Some of those guys bring in toothpick, they bring in cotton board, and their turnover is in hundreds of millions. So what those guys need is organization. They need to be taken away from the informal sector to the formal sector, which is where we have the mobile banking, the financial inclusions. Do you understand? That is for them. Money is not their problem. Some of the guys even in computer village that are selling laptop, one of the system of the turnovers they are doing, you'll be amazed. But the business is just right pocket, left pocket. The guy dies, the business dies. And we don't want to continue at that level as a nation. So the government will look at how to bring them on board and begin to make them more organized, more formal. That's its inclusion. That's their own idea for micro.
So for
then the next level, the small, is funding. Fantastic idea. They need money, capital. So they need to now start looking at the specialized institutions, the BOI, the NEFON, the UN. So those guys can't do debts, just like Ayo said. They don't have collateral, and debts don't do startup. You go equity, you go owners funds, or you go grants and aid, which is you win, which you don't have to pay back. It's almost like a gift, like a seed capital. So startup needs funds. They need incubation centers, and they need EDCs. The government have about 3 currently in Kano, Ikeja, and I think Onitsha. So we need more so that we can train and empower people. Like he said, some of these guys don't have the required skills even to run the business. So as we're giving you money, we're also giving you training. So we have EDCs as part of the policies for them. Then the next people are the
medium enterprise.
Medium. Those ones need structure. They need infrastructure. They need roads to market. They need storage.
Everybody needs infrastructure.
Exactly, but they need more because at that level they need to take their tomatoes to the market. They need to preserve their tomatoes. They need to, so they need structure. They need all of that. Infrastructure is the main challenge of small. So you see a lot of them in mind.
Water.
Exactly, infrastructure. The guy that is how many road? He just him and maybe one or two staff. They just go to the office, do a bulk of their job on the laptop and over the internet. That's startups. So when you are small means you are doing 10 to 100, they are doing about 100 million to 200 million there, but you need infrastructure, Then the last guys that are big, they don't need money. They are probably handling the infrastructure challenge. They need trade facilitation. They want to go to the next market. They want to take their product outside. Trade facilitation. They want to participate in an exhibition in Canada. They want to. So you see most of them in LCCI in Man. They are looking at the government policies, what's happening. They're looking at industry. So they need more of trade facilitation. So that's my take on what the government should do and the segment that is available in the SME market.
So just before we wrap up the segment, we know that as much as possible the government is trying to work with the private sector to see how they can grow the economy. How can the private sector actually play a part in helping SME to achieve economic growth?
That is what the government is. That is what is happening presently. The private sector has always been there, and they've always been ready to work with the government. But the question has always been: is the government ready to work with them? So based on that, we are expecting the government to create an enabling environment and then create forums where the private sector can liaise with the government, and by then both parties will make headway on the way forward.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for speaking with me this morning on the program. It's been an interesting conversation, Ayo and Edward. Well, I've been speaking to two business development experts, Ayo Mahome, he's also the managing director of Coinbox Limited, and Edward Esene, he's a senior consultant, Kinetic Associates, and we've been looking at SME development and how this growth and development can be achieved through government participation. Business Morning continues in just a moment.